I heard the news on the Monday. I was aware I had 4 comedy gigs that week on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I didn't stop crying until Thursday morning. Absolutely had to tell our daughters, our 5 girls. Becca had to tell my parents, who are still alive. I lost my little brother to brain cancer a couple of years ago. So the thought of telling these old timers that I might be dead as well before them, it's just kind of unheard of. But on that Thursday, I decided I need to do these gigs, and I decided to choose joy and laughter and to be positive and upbeat. And if I did have 5 months, which works out at 22 weeks, which also works out 150 days, I wanted to make every flipping day count. And that's what I've tried to do ever since I had that news.
I have felt unlucky at times because of all the statistics that Steve said about his. It sounds very similar. And the only time I actually sort of almost said why, and it wasn't why, it was when they rang me up on the Friday night about 7 o'clock and it's your consultant on the phone, so you know it's not good. And he said, I'm awful sorry, but the trial's being cancelled. And I just thought, oh, someone's having a laugh now, aren't they? Somebody is having a laugh now.
Hello and welcome to Unbelievable, the show that gets Christians and non-Christians talking and thinking about the subjects that matter to all of us. I am your host, Andy Kind. And today, well, it's a tough one, actually. We're returning to the subject of suffering. The most Googled question about God is, why would he allow suffering? And many people often ask, where is God amidst the suffering? Well, I am privileged today to have 2 people with me, 2 men, 2 comedians, and 2 friends, which is why it's personal and tough, both of whom are living with terminal diagnoses of cancer. I've been joined by Allan Finnegan and Steve Legg. Hello to you both.
Hello, pal.
Hello. You all right?
I'm all right. I'll introduce you both. Allan, of course, is a returning hero to Unbelievable. Before Christmas, he featured on a show featuring me and Milton Jones, and that was a lovely show. And at the time, he was aware, I was aware, but most people watching weren't aware that he had this diagnosis. Allan will get you to talk about that, obviously, over the course of the show. In 2020, Allan, much to his own surprise, got to the semi-final of Britain's Got Talent, the ITV variety competition. Got to the semi-final, did very well, and then went back to being a Baptist minister in Bootle, as well as doing his comedy. Steve has a slightly more intricate description, so I shall read that now. Steve Legg is a British speaker, author, and founder of the Breakout Trust, a Christian mission organisation based in Littlehampton on the south coast of England. Steve's passion is to communicate the Christian message to young and old, and he has done that at top venues globally. He is the author of 19 books and is editor of the groundbreaking men's Christian lifestyle magazine, Sorted, which has 80,000 readers in 26 countries. His latest book, The Last Laugh, Reflections on a Funny Man with Terminal Cancer, which you must read, is described by me and many others as a very funny book on a serious subject by a very funny guy. And I can certainly add my testimony to that. So Steve and Allan, thanks so much for being with us. And we want to, naturally, with us being comedians, handle it with a lightness of touch, but this is a real situation. This is not a theory. You have both been given diagnoses of a terminal nature, and so we do want you to talk honestly and openly. And so let's start, if we can, by just getting a bit of backstory for your careers and Christian faiths. Steve, I don't think you've been on the show before, so why don't you start? If you just give us a quick backstory, if that's possible for Steve Legg, given how much you've done. Give us a quick backstory about your career and your ministry.
Okay, so been on the road, would you believe it, this year, 36 years.
Wow.
Doing magic, comedy. I started off doing escapology back in the day, so I get out of chains, ropes, handcuffs, dangle upside down in a straitjacket, upside down from a 50-metre road crane, using it as a very, very visual parable to speak to people about knowing God and the freedom that knowing Jesus brings. In latter years, I've done more magic and comedy, travel the world, go anywhere once, probably done 28 countries, I think. over that time. So it's been an absolute blast, Andy, and I love doing it. And I'm as passionate about doing it today as I was back in October '88 when I started. And you probably
Wow.
weren't even born then, were you?
I was born.
When were you born?
It doesn't matter when I was born, Steve. But thanks, that's great. And Al, obviously, some people will know you, but can you just give us a quick backstory?
I came to faith when I was 16 from a non-faith background, really. I've been in the same church ever since, so 41 years now. I've been the minister in that church now for the last, getting up to 19 years. And yeah, that's it really, I think. That's me. I haven't wrote any books. I haven't
you should
started
do
a
it. There's a book
magazine.
in everyone. Do it.
I haven't started a magazine, and I can't escape from not. So,
Well, you can't escape from coming on this show on a regular basis, Alan, by the looks of things. Let's quickly go straight into it. The first question I wanted to ask both of you is, what was your initial reaction, that sort of instinctive gut reaction, when the doctor said to you, this is terminal? Steve, let's start with you. What was that first reaction?
Well, would it be helpful to sort of set it in some sort of context? So 2.5 years ago, my wife noticed a tiny little black mark on the underside of my foot. She was coming out of the shower. I had my big feet sticking out the end of the bed. It looked like a little tiny blood blister, and she nagged me to get it checked out. And I thought, well, it was during COVID. I thought, you can't see your doctor. It's a little blood blister from over walking the dog. So I left it a little bit, then realised I could take a photo of it. So I did that, sent it in. She called me in, the GP, sent me off to see a dermatologist who took a biopsy and phoned up to say there's a little bit of skin cancer. So I kind of held on to that, being very positive a little bit. I kind of liked that. I'm sure we could do something about it. And to cut a very long story short, of 2.5 years, had various ops to remove it from the underside of my foot. They went 2 centimetres deep into my foot. And I thought I misheard him. I thought, surely 2 centimetres should go all the way through. But he really did mean it, 2 centimetres deep, and cut out a load. But unfortunately, it had spread through my lymphatic system up into my groin. I had a big op at the Marsden just over a year ago, where they took out, well, I've got a 14-inch scar. It looks like I've had a shark attack. I asked if they could sew it up really jagged, so it would be more of a story, but professionalism wouldn't allow them to do that. They took out 29 of my lymph nodes, found cancer in 19 of them, and we really thought it was fixed. And then last April, just got back from spring harvest, went to see the cancer doctor, the oncologist. She had tears in her eyes, and I thought, this is not a good sign. And she showed me in, and my wife Becca was there as well. And essentially she explained that there was nothing they could do, and the cancer had spread to my brain, to my liver, to my stomach and my spine. So that was quite a blow. And I said to her, how long have I got, Doc? Have I got 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years? Thinking she'd say, oh, probably 20. And she said 5 months. So I had that in April, 17th of April. So 17th of September was my D-Day. And you don't need to be Carol Vorderman to figure out that that wasn't my D-Day. And I'm still here, and I'm feeling okay. And the cancer's not gone. I was back at the Marsden yesterday, as they found a few more traces in my brain. So in 10 days, I go back there for this process called Cyberknife, which sounds terrifying. And every time I go there, I say, you've got to change it to something nicer, like cyber thingy or something. But they weren't having any truck with that. So basically, I'm laid on a bench on a table with a mask that is a bespoke mask, so you just can't move. And this robot moves around you for 2.5 hours, killing all the cancer in your brain. So to answer your original question, Andy, I couldn't believe it. And I still can't believe it, almost. I'm not sure what it's like for Al. I'm still living in disbelief, really. This sort of thing happens to other people. It doesn't happen to us. You know, we see the adverts that 1 in 2 of us will get cancer in our lifetimes. And, you know, I'm clearly one of those too. But I'm feeling good. I'm feeling very positive. I heard the news on the Monday. I was aware I had 4 comedy gigs that week on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I didn't stop crying until Thursday morning. We had to tell our daughters, our 5 girls. Becca had to tell my parents, who are still alive. I lost my little brother to brain cancer a couple of years ago. So the thought of telling these old timers that I might be dead as well before them, it's just kind of unheard of. But on that Thursday, I decided I need to do these gigs, and I decided to choose joy and laughter and to be positive and upbeat. And if I did have 5 months, which works out at 22 weeks, which also works out 150 days, I wanted to make every flipping day count. And that's what I've tried to do ever since I had that news.
Well, and that comes across in the way that you're speaking and in the work that you've done since. And you seem to be more prolific than you've ever been. And that's, again, saying something. We'll come back to you. Al, what about you? That first reaction?
For me, it was slightly different because I'd been diagnosed with eye cancer, which is quite rare, apparently. And I've got it in both of my eyes. One of them isn't as bad as the other, so they just monitor that one. But I had to have an operation, and as part, that was 2 years ago. And as part of the operation, you can get a biopsy at the time. It's the only time you can do it because they take your eye out, I think, or something, and whatever, it doesn't matter, the gruesome details, but they can do a biopsy. And my wife told me not to get the biopsy, but I wanted to know myself. And so I was on the table, they said, so you're not getting a biopsy? And I went, no, I want the biopsy. And they said, oh, okay. Anyway, the biopsy results come back, and they said, you've got a particular gene, which means it's highly likely to come back, like 80% chance to come back, either in the eye or in some other part of your body, usually the liver. And so for the last 2 years, I get scanned every 6 months, and I've been expecting this a little bit for 2 years. So I've been living with it nagging in the back of my mind for 2 years, until just before Christmas this year again, they rang me with the usual 6 monthly checkup and said, unfortunately, it's metastasized. I can't say that word to your liver. It's spread, yeah. It's spread to your liver. And I had to go for a few more scans, and then they confirmed that it was the eye cancer that had spread to my liver, and that there was no cure. They said to me there are 2 treatments, but unfortunately none of them are available on the NHS at the moment because NICE won't approve them. I was like, oh wow, thanks mate. That was like the worst game of bullseye ever, come and have a look at what you could have had. And literally, so then I was set up to go on a trial, and that got cancelled last minute. And they told me I would be too sick to be on the trial when it came back. And so they just basically said, go home, live your life. You've got, well, I got an SR1 form, so that means you've got less than 12 months to live. But then they said there is another treatment, but it's private. And so they encouraged me to start a GoFundMe page, and I was just like, nah, mate, this is when you find out nobody likes you. So what's the point? And well, we can talk about that a bit later, that type of stuff.
Yeah, that would be good.
Initially, I was expecting it. So it wasn't it's a weird feeling because it was almost right, okay, this is it now. It's happened. I wouldn't say relief. That's a weird word to use, but it was almost, well, I can stop worrying about it because it's happened. What they said would probably happen has happened, and then there was a 90% chance that you'll die from it within a year. So yeah, so I was more, and I haven't really cried. The hardest bit was telling me mother, telling the kids was difficult. They all cry all the time. And I haven't really cried. I've had a couple of tears in my eyes for various other things, which we can go into later. But it was the toughest bit was telling me mum, because she's on her own and stuff, and I'm her only son. So it was a bit difficult to tell me ma.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people, myself included, have shed a modest tear for both of you chaps. But what's coming across is that although there's disbelief, and there was disbelief, from neither of you is there that sense of denial. You are fronting up and facing it down, and refusing to be broken by it. And what's coming across is that sense of, well, while we're here, let's work. While we're here, let's enjoy the time that we've got as much as possible. So, Steve, for you, what was the reaction? You and your wife Becca have written about this. What was the reaction from family members and wider community when you were sharing the news?
Well, I think everyone's shocked initially. I mean, the type of cancer I've got, which I didn't say, is just a really rare type of skin cancer, which has got nothing to do with the sun. It's called acral lentiginous melanoma, which is extremely rare, and even rarer for a white guy to have it. So just my luck, you know. I like to buck trends, really, but this is one I didn't see coming. So, yeah. I've forgotten the question now, Andy. What did you say? Yeah.
It was about the reaction of people.
Everyone's shocked.
Yeah,
because it is so unusual, and I'm still so well. You know, I saw someone on the beach when I was walking my dog yesterday, and they looked at me as if they'd seen a ghost. And I have some friends who want to visit because they think I'm on a life support machine, but I'm walking 5 or 6 miles a day. I'm gigging, I'm travelling, I'm writing books, I'm busier than ever. I think it's really disbelief because, as I said right at the top of the show, these things happen to other people, don't they? Mm-hmm. They don't happen to us. They happen to sort of older people or people who've been ill all their life. I mean, look at me and Al. We're fit as fiddles, aren't we, normally? I didn't have anything wrong with me until I was 55. You know, I've never had anything wrong with me.
And so next question, following on from what you were saying, Steve, is there an added layer to that in terms of it happening to other people when you think, but I am a Christian and God loves me? Is there even a sort of, on some level, a gut reaction, a gut instinct to say that? Is that, well, why is this happening to me at this age? Because I've served God all my life, and why is this happening to me, and why is it happening now? Particularly in your case, Steve, given that it's so rare that's happened. Statistically, it's so unlikely, and yet it has befallen you. So for both of you, Al, have you asked that question, even if you rationalized it afterwards? Have you asked that question of, why is this happening to me? Why is God allowing this to happen to me?
People say why, and I think, well, why not? I've never asked the question why. It's why not. And I think it's more a question. I talk about it in the book. We do a whole chapter about not why, but what. What are we going to do about it? And this has happened to me. And I often say to people, it's too good an opportunity not to make something good come out of this. If this is just a sad story, then it's a wasted opportunity. What amazing things can happen out of this situation. That's how I look at it. And I'm sharing my story. God has given me all sorts of platforms that I never thought I would have. I've written a book that has gone incredibly well. I mean, just all the beauty that you can see in these situations is phenomenal. Just one little story I heard from a guy called Shakil in Phuket City in Thailand, who found me through Facebook and wanted to write to me, but he produced the books in their factory out in Thailand, and he was in charge of the covers. And he tells me he bought one. I'm sure he didn't buy one. He picked one up. He helped himself, and he gave it to his nan who was battling leukemia. And he said it was transformational for her and really inspirational. And I thought, wow, I would have never been able to reach a little old lady in Thailand with the gospel and a message of hope. If this hadn't happened to me, and I'd rather it hadn't happened to me, and I'd rather, I could live till 85, 90 or whatever, and I still might. And I'm full of faith that I'm not going to, I'm going to be here for years and years. But for me, what good things are going to come out of this? So I've never asked why.
Yeah, I guess I haven't asked. Have I asked why? I might have pondered it, but it's my family has probably asked more why than me, including my daughters, who were kind of obviously grew up in church and all that, and one of them sort of still goes and works for a Christian solicitor's firm and all that type of stuff, and the other one who doesn't go to church, just because she can't be bothered, I think, but they've done the more wise stuff, and I've been trying to be the more calm and influence on them, saying, well, we all die at some point, kind of thing. It's just it's how and when, isn't it? And so I haven't really done the why question. I don't think. I think I've tried to make other people come to terms with it in some way, make sense of it. So I haven't really said why. I have felt unlucky at times because of all the statistics that Steve said about his. It sounds very similar. And the only time I actually sort of almost said why, and it wasn't why, it was when they rang me up on the Friday night about 7 o'clock and it's your consultant on the phone, so you know it's not good. And he said, I'm awful sorry, but the trial's being cancelled. And I just thought, oh, someone's having a laugh now, aren't they? Somebody is having a laugh now. Your only hope is now just being pulled from under you, you know, unless you can raise 200 grand. So it was just like, yeah. But that was the only time I've kind of not been okay with it to a degree. I know that sounds silly, you're okay with it. I kind of am okay with it. I'm okay with the prognosis and all that. It was just that one time that I was like, oh, someone's taking the mickey out of me now. You know, I've got rare cancer. Then it's rare because it's in both eyes, even rarer, you know, and then I have the gene that, you know, and all this type of stuff. And then I'm like, oh no, this trial that he's selling me, the consultant saying this will be good for you, suddenly it's just taken away. And then he's like, I'm awful sorry, there's nothing we can do for you now at all. So that was that for about an hour that night. I was thinking, come on, someone's messing with my head here. But apart from that, I haven't really done the why thing.
Yeah, and as Steve says,
a bit like Steve, why not?
Yeah, exactly. So not why, but why not, and
what?
Not what if, but what now?
Yeah.
And I guess a bit like Steve, I decided that whatever time I had left, I was going to live it rather than live dying, if you get what I mean. I can't explain that any better. I'm going to live life to whatever time I've got left. And it actually gives you more focus and you can do more. In some weird way, you can actually do more. But then just, you know, when your end date is miles away in your own head, because it always is, isn't it? When it's suddenly brought into sharp focus, you actually can achieve more and do more.
Definitely.
And have more family time and everything else and actually be in the room with them rather than thinking about football or something, you know. And so for me, it's been good, and I've decided to live life, not live dying, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting phrase. I had to go to a hospice, and that was one of the worst days of my life. You know, you don't expect mid-50s to be visiting a hospice to talk about end-of-life care. And, I mean, they were brilliant there. And we had a few laughs, not many. But he talked about two options. You can either live dying or die living, which is what you're saying, Al. You know, live dying or die living. And, it is focusing, making the most of every day. And I've noticed all sorts of things that I've never noticed before. Birds singing. And I know birds sing all the time, but I notice them a lot more these days. And I walked down the beach today, as Andy said. I live in LA, as we prefer to call it. Littlehampton sounds, LA sounds much more impressive. And just walking along the ocean on a lovely sunny day, you're just thinking, isn't this beautiful? Isn't it wonderful to be alive?
I live up north, Steve, so I've noticed the wind and rain on my face. But I've actually, and I mean, I'm not like making a joke, I've actually focused on it to feel, there's a song in it, Feel the Rain on Your Face or whatever it is. But anyway, I've actually felt it, and it was like a real moment. It's hard to explain, but little things become big. Little things that normally I'd be almost moaning about. I was actually walking down the road in the rain and thinking to myself, I can feel the rain on my face. This is all right, you know? So,
well, we need to take a quick break, but we hope that you're enjoying it so far. We're talking today on Unbelievable about suffering and two people who are living with terminal cancer diagnoses, Steve Legg and Allan Finnegan. As always, we want to know what you think, so you can email us unbelievable@premier.org.uk. You can get in touch via social media at UnbelievableFE for X, formerly known as Twitter, at Premier Unbelievable for Instagram, or facebook.com/Premier Unbelievable on Facebook. We will be back in just a moment to continue our conversation on suffering.
We are launching a brand new course which helps us to consider the evidence and questions around the birth of Jesus. It's called Did It Really Happen? The Birth of Jesus. Why not sign up for the course or gift it to a friend? Find out more at premierunbelievable.com.
Hello, welcome back to Unbelievable with me, your host, Andy Kind, and it's a tough one today. We are joined by Steve Legg and Allan Finnegan, two comedians, two friends of mine who are both living with terminal cancer diagnoses, and we're talking about what life is like. We're talking about how it feels when all of a sudden the rug is pulled from under your feet, particularly at such a modest age as Steve and Allan are. But in this section, I do want to talk about why it is, and if you've been watching and listening so far, you'll see that they are not just stoical, they are joyful, they are purposeful, they are meeting their suffering head on. And I want to talk about the reasons for that. So guys, let's talk a little bit about hope. First of all, what is hope and what isn't it? So people are very apt to say, oh, I hope you get better, or I hope it all turns out all right. But that's more wishful thinking, isn't it? So what is hope? Steve, let's start with you. What would you say when someone asks you to define hope within your context at the moment?
Do you know, it's a very good question, Andy. I really don't know. It's just something I'm clinging on to, really. I've always said, listen, I'm in a win-win situation. Whatever happens to me, I expect you're the same, Al. If I beat this, man, what a story that is to tell. To forget about one book, this is going to be a whole series of blimmin' books, that I've beaten cancer. It's phenomenal. So I've won. But if I go and die and go to be with Jesus, which is, I guess, the hope of the gospel, which is the good news. This word gospel means good news. Then I've won as well. I'm in a win-win situation. I'm a man of very simple faith, really. You may say I'm a very simple man, regardless of the faith thing. But I just believe, God has been saying to me through these last 2.5 years, three things. I love you, I'm with you, and try not to be scared. And that's kind of the hope that I'm clinging on to. I've talked about it's a little bit like being on a roller coaster, the ups and downs. I went to the Marsden yesterday to be scanned for a big treatment that's happening in 10 days. And every time I go in, I think, God, I wonder if today's the day when the scans come back. And they say, we don't understand this, Mr. Legg. They've all gone. They've completely disappeared. But if they don't, then they don't. It might happen next time.
And I think what you said was really interesting, because sort of the question beneath the question of why would God allow suffering, why would God allow things to happen to me? The question beneath that is, does God actually love me? Why would a God of love allow that? And I think your answer of God saying to you, I love you and try not to be scared, we know because of the cross of Jesus, and Jesus coming down and taking evil and sin and brokenness and death upon himself. We might not know why God allows suffering, but we do know what it's not about. What it isn't is that he doesn't love us. God allows suffering for who knows what reason. And I think we have to say, don't we, as Christians, we don't have those answers, and we don't think it's good. But it's not because he doesn't love us, because he has shown us that on the cross. And again, you felt God say to you that he loves you still, and it doesn't disqualify you.
Yeah, Andy, I've grown closer to God, and I don't know about you, Al. This has done something to my faith. I started following Jesus. I was 12 or 13 years old, first generation Christian. My parents didn't go to church, no one in my family. I saw a poster up at our school about the Boys Brigade, which is a bit like the Scouts, but you've got to go to church, which I wasn't very keen on. But then I heard there was a Girls Brigade and you could play football every Saturday. And I thought those two things outweigh the bad church thing. And I went along, and it eventually changed my life at a Boys Brigade camp. And, I've had that strong faith since I was 12 or 13, and I never doubted it. But I feel in these last 2.5 years, and certainly since hearing I'll be dead in 5 months, I'm closer to God. What about you, Al?
I mean, for me, the hope, I'm a bit like you. What does that actually mean, hope? But I guess being a Christian for like 40 odd years, there's something about the longevity of that has seen God's hand in your life through all the thick and thin and the good and the bad, and there is, as you said, as you so well put it, Steve, about the gospel being our hope is of our eternal destination. We have a worldview that this life is just a passing through, although it's more than that in lots of ways. It's not just like, let's just hang on until we get to heaven, the kind of thing. It's to be lived. It's to be enjoyed. It's to be joyful and bring that joy around us. And we talk a lot in churches about the kingdom of God coming and being people who sort of bring something of the kingdom into where we are, and all that hope and joy and everything else, and even resurrection to a degree is all part of the story. And I think with me, it's that years. I use the wrong words, but it's like a latent faith almost. There's that faith of years that has seen God be faithful. So even though it is a bad prognosis, and some people say it's the hope that kills you, but even if it's a bad prognosis, it's still the faithfulness of God throughout my life makes me trust Him still. Mm. So I think I'm more about trust, knowing the hope that I will. If I die, it's my worldview, it's my belief that I go to be with God. Yeah. However, there's a book in the Bible which is Job. I didn't know whether we'd get onto this, but and if you don't know the story of Job, read it. It's an interesting read because God allows Satan to basically test Job a lot, and the only thing he can't do is kill him. Right? So everything else goes massively wrong. His kids die, everything gets terrible story. And a lot of people focus on the end of Job and say, well, at the end, God was faithful and he got double back what he had, all his money and all that type of stuff. And I was reflecting on this recently, and I thought, yeah, but no one still wants to be Job, do they, in the story? You don't really still want to be Job, and you definitely don't want to be Job's kids. So for me, trust is a better word than hope. The hope is of the gospel of the resurrection to eternal life with God. In a place where they talk about no disease, no tears, no darkness, almost this picture of perfection, this picture of how God intended things to be, and we often talk about that, the kingdom type of analogies. But so for me, it's more trust. It's a bit like when I think I'll get the Bible story wrong now because I didn't prep for this. But it's a bit like when David is there and he's fought a bear and all that type of stuff. It's the years have gone by that I can trust God now. And even if that means I end up dying in the next year or two, that's kind of okay because of this hope of the gospel that we have as well. So it's trust and hope mixed for me. Sorry.
And do you think, both of you, what do you think your approach would be to this situation if you had a different worldview? If you were atheists, if you were Buddhist or Muslim, do you think you would be dealing with this situation differently, Steve?
I can't say because I'm not. I'm me, the world's eternal optimist. Anything can happen. I can't say, Andy. I guess so. I've got that hope that whatever happens, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be with Jesus, or I'm going to kick this, and I can tell other people and share my faith. If I didn't have that hope or trust, it's hard to say, isn't it? Yeah. How would you be, Andy?
Andy.
How would I be?
Yeah, I asked a question. You asked a question. Yeah, how would you be?
Yeah, okay. This is not the standard motif for Unbelievable, Steve, where the moderator gets put on the spot. But no, I think it is a good question. Okay, fair enough. You can throw it back at me. I think anyone of any worldview can make a decision to make the most of the time that they've got. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think you can try and live for the day. That's fair enough. I think where the gospel is different is that it's the only worldview where God comes and does something about suffering, and the crucifixion and the resurrection really they're down payments, they're promises, aren't they, of how it will ultimately be in the end. Things are not as they should be, but it won't always be that way because it wasn't always that way in the beginning. So I think God coming and doing something about suffering, Jesus being born is God's way of saying, I've come to find you. Jesus dying on the cross is God's way of saying, I understand what it means for you to suffer. The resurrection is God's way of saying to death that it doesn't get to win. And so I think without Christian faith, I would really struggle. I think I would not have a choice between hope and despair because I'm not sure there'd be very much to hope for. I think ultimately I would, just become a bit of a nihilist. And obviously, again, which is not to say that people of different worldviews don't cope incredibly well with terrible news, because the human spirit is strong and ardent, isn't it? But anyway, I'm going to ask you another question now, because I came on this show to be the moderator. And so, if this is a question that any Christian who's gone through any kind of difficult period and shared it with their Christian friends will have had people be annoying. So how do you cope? Because there must have been, and you must feel free not to give examples if you don't want to, but have there been conversations you've had with Christians where you've just thought, you are so far of the mark, either emotionally or tonally. You're emotionally tone deaf in what you're saying. How are you coping with that? How are you talking to people? For instance, when someone says, God wants all diseases healed, and so we must pray for your healing because that's what God wants. I mean, Steve, I'm sure you must know a lot of people like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would start. I talk about it a lot, which has been really helpful. I mean, I was at New Wine. Well, you were there, Andy. The big Christian festival. Yeah, it was at Detling last year. It's back to Shepton Mallet. And I just dread people coming and saying, how are you? Because I want to forget that I've got cancer. 2 minutes for 2 hours. Wow, wouldn't it be amazing to forget? Yeah, for 2 days. But when you're at an event like that, people are so well-meaning and people are so kind. But when 100th person has asked you, how are you? And I've said, yeah, I'm good. And they've not taken the hint. And they say, no, how are you really? I said, yeah, I'm good. Clearly not wanting to talk about it. And then they push it and they say, no, really, how are you? Yes, I'm good. And then the same guy, the fourth time, he said, no, what I'm trying to say is, how's your prognosis? What is your prognosis?
Yeah.
And I said to him, listen, buddy, I just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Some people just don't take the hint. And I was interviewed on another radio station the following day, and I talked about this, and the guy was listening, and it was a bit embarrassing, but he wrote to apologise. He said, sorry for being, because I called him a muppet on the radio. I didn't mention who he was. And he texted me, said, look, I'm so sorry for being a muppet. And I said, that's okay, Gonzo. And we had a laugh about it. But just sometimes we just do not want to talk about it. And then people, one guy told me I shouldn't be wearing rubber in my shoes. A guy from a Christian healing and deliverance centre. And I thought, I've had cancer on my foot, so I need to look after my foot a little bit. And he said he shouldn't wear shoes. And he tried ringing me, and so I had to block him. And people mean well, but it's just sometimes not helpful.
Yeah, I've got I try to do with that is I try to be gracious and think it's more about them and what they feel they have to say or do, and so I'm in a ministers' conference as we speak, and so I've got people coming up to me, just touching me on the shoulder and praying oddly all the time. I just keep getting poked by people all the time. It's quite annoying at times, but I try to think I try to get inside their head and their need to do or say something to me because they don't really know how to react. And then I've got like my non-Christian friends who all suddenly know a scientist, aka drug dealer, who can cure me. It's quite I most of the time I'm generally polite and say, oh, it's okay, you know what I mean, kind of thing. So I try to say, well, this is more about them than me. They're trying to articulate something to say to me or some response, but you do get I'm in a minister's conference, and so I don't see these guys all the time. I see them once a year, and so everybody is asking me, how are you, and how are you, and how are you, and how are you, and what's the treatment, what's there, and it's like a story on repeat, and you do get a bit worn down by it. But in some ways, I never forget I've got cancer. But being reminded of it all the time. But on the flip side of that, I'm trying to raise a lot of money. And so I have to talk about it a lot to try and get people to donate to that. So it's like the paparazzi for the famous people. You almost need them to keep you famous. So I need to keep saying the story to almost keep it in the public eye, to almost try and get more donations and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword for me.
And I'm really sorry if I sound ungrateful, Andy, because I really don't want to sound ungrateful. And it's so wonderful that people are so concerned. But the point is, sometimes when you're at New Wine and you've been asked, or Spring Harvest, and you've been asked 100 times a day. So I say to people, just say, how's things? And I can say to them, I'm having a terrible day. I'm feeling sad, I'm not going to see another Christmas and all this sort of thing. But the likelihood is I'm going to say, look, I'm great. Let's have a beer or a coffee and a sausage roll or a curry. So just ask those questions. And if people clearly don't want to talk about it, don't pursue it.
You do know that you're going to have to apologise to that fella again. He'll be ringing you again because you called him a muppet again on this. I
know. But it was so nice that he could see that and he apologised. Yeah. And I thought, that's brilliant. And other times people can't, Once I was at the gathering, this big men's event, setting up my stand, 2,500 blokes, my favourite event of the year. This Wally comes up to me and says, keep fighting, brother. And I said, oh, thank you. And he said, yeah, I lost my brother to cancer this week. And I go, why is this helpful? I've got a little group of friends and we have curry nights. And one of them, the space of 1.5 hours told me about 3 mates of his who died of cancer. And I think, why are you telling me this? This is not helping.
Yeah, so that's the question I was going to ask. Can you help us to be helpful? People who want to, whether it's with you or someone else in a different situation, what are the do's and don'ts of approaching someone with a terminal diagnosis? What are the things that are helpful to say?
As far as I'm concerned, how's things? What do you need from me? I think is a really good thing. So it might be a shoulder to cry on. It might be a pint, or to borrow a hedge trimmer. What do you need from me? And please don't keep telling us about everyone who's died of cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, please don't keep telling us of everyone who's got better through some magic mushroom or some scientist from Manchester who can cure cancer, and the drug companies don't want to do it, and all that. I have people coming up to me all the time telling me, well, I know someone who went on this sort of stuff that they don't regulate and all that, but it works. It defo works, mate. It defo works. You should try it.
What about those people who come up and say, I know someone who was given a terminal cancer diagnosis and God healed them?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. How does that then, should neither of you end up recovering from this, how does that make you feel or not feel? Is that a problem, not a problem? What would be your view on some people being healed, others not?
I think it's wonderful.
I think it's a mad thing. I believe in that God can heal people and stuff like that. My general, I'm a minister of the church, so I get to pray for lots of people and all that type of stuff. And I've done over the years. And most of them have died. I'm not going to lie. I'm not the best prayer, obviously. And so I've heard people. I've actually prayed for someone who got cured of stomach cancer. They told me a year later at an event I was at, Fresh Streams event. I prayed for them one year, and the next year that they bumped into me and said, oh, by the way, I thought you should know. And I was like, really? Because I felt nothing when I was praying for them, to get what I mean. I guess that's good because it was God. But I've also prayed for lots of people, including friends, and they've passed away. And so it's one of them things that I just don't know, you know what I mean? But it won't stop me praying for people. I guess that's the most important bit. it wouldn't stop me if someone wanted me to pray. And even in my own sickness, I'll pray for people. I wouldn't say, oh, no, stick here because I'm sick as well, kind of thing. I'd still pray for people, and if they got healed, great. I might have some thoughts about that. I don't really know. But for me, it was... I still believe God can heal.
Definitely.
I don't know why he doesn't at times. And my biggest percentage of people they don't get healed.
That's really it's not good to hear, obviously, but it is it's good to hear that honesty. And I think it's a good distinction about why we pray, which a lot of people, both inside and outside the Christian world, don't seem to quite grasp, which is that prayer is primarily about securing ourselves in God rather than securing things from God. And the reason we pray for people is primarily so that God would come close to them, or they would get closer to God, which is obviously the promise of resurrection anyway, isn't it? So one thing I find helpful is saying that when people are healed, that is just a signpost to the time when it will all be wrapped up and every tear will be wiped dry.
The end of Revelation.
So,
I always say to people, what's the worst that can happen when we pray? What is the worst that can happen? It stays the same. Nothing happens. That's the actual worst, isn't it? That the situation doesn't change in what we can see and physically take in, and that we don't know what happens in different realms. But what's the worst? So what's wrong with what would be wrong with praying? Would be my thing. But,
But the good thing to distinguish, as we've said earlier, is that when nothing happens, it's not because necessarily you lack faith, and it's not because God is not active and interested, and it's not because he doesn't love you. So that's good to hear from...
No, because that fella I prayed for who got healed of stomach cancer that he told me a year later, in fairness, if I prayed for him with very little faith, if any at all. So it wasn't about my faith. I don't buy into that, King, where it's my faith in praying or your faith as the sick person. It's our faith in God that kind of matters most. Anyway,
that's wonderful.
Sorry.
Well, we hope you're enjoying the show wherever you're listening or watching this from. I've been joined today on Unbelievable by Steve Legg and Allan Finnegan, two very funny men who have both been given and are living with terminal diagnoses of cancer. But we're talking about hope, we're talking about joy, we're going to move on and talk about purpose. In the third and final section, we're also going to talk about those little redemptive ripples that are flowing outwards from both of their situations. So stay tuned on Unbelievable, and we'll be back for part 3 after this short break.
I would ask Tom this, and this is a surprising question maybe, to nominate for me one thing, just one thing, that Christianity has introduced that doesn't have some source, some parallel, some analogy in previous and in other civilizations.
The ideal of lifelong matrimony, I think that's a very distinctive Christian concept. I think the category of what by the 19th century is coming to be categorized as homosexuality and heterosexuality, I think they have no precedence. I think the notion of secularism, the idea of there being religions, I think all these are entirely exclusive to Christian civilization. I think the concept of science as it emerges in the 19th century, I think is entirely exclusive to Christian civilization. I think the idea that human beings are created in the image of God, that is obviously something that Christians share with Jews. It gives a degree of dignity to human beings that no other cultural tradition that I'm aware of even remotely approximates.
Well, welcome back to Unbelievable. This is part 3 of our conversation on suffering and terminal cancer diagnoses with me, your host Andy Kind, and my friends Steve Legg and Allan Finnegan. And it has been a very honest and open conversation from these two men who are joyful and hopeful in the midst of absolutely tragic circumstances for both of them. In this section, chaps, I want to talk about the future. I want to talk about fear, and I want to talk about the purpose that drives us forward. Let's start with fear, culture seems to be saturated with fear. Young people, particularly, fearful of the future, of what may come. On a personal level, first of all, we'll start with you, Steve. Do you have those
You always
moments
start with me.
yeah?
Start with Al.
Alan,
Oh, I like that.
when Alan's written
I like you starting with Steve. You
gives
carry
another
on,
couple of
Andy.
minutes.
when Alan has written a book, I will trust him to open the section, Steve. Until then, it's
Fair play.
yeah. Let's start with Alan. I
Yes.
think on this.
Ah,
Alan, do you have those moments of fear where you sort of get a jolt of recognition and reality of, oh wow, this is really happening. The clock is really ticking down. And if so, and when that happens, how do you deal with that emotionally, psychologically, prayerfully? How do you cope with those moments?
I think the fear, is it fear? I don't know what it is. I can't plan too far ahead anymore. So it actually makes kind of living one day at a time a bit more real, and I understand it more. Where I would often speak that way. Oh, we just need one day. Don't worry about tomorrow and what tomorrow will bring. And that's the kind of pat answer. And I would plan for the future. I'd have a pension pot and all that type of stuff. Where now, living in the day and as the scripture says, the day has enough worries for itself, kind of thing. Living in the day is very real to me, and I don't think I'd have understood that without this diagnosis. But I'm going to lean back on what I said earlier about the 40 years of just trusting God. The 40 years of me being a Christian hasn't all been roses and bells and all that. There's been some really tough times in them 40 years. And being a minister isn't all hallelujahs, if you get what I mean. So, but 40 years of seeing, and on retrospect or looking back, I can't remember what that word is that I'm trying to find, is literally you can almost sense and see the hand of God in things when you reflect back on things. At least you can make sense of things that happened, and you can almost see the hand and the purpose of God in life. And so I'm going to revert back to that kind of longevity of faith. Keeps me trusting in God. So the fear, while it can be real, and we're in a bit of uncertain times in lots of ways, but the fear is mixed with faith because of the future to be, what we talked about earlier, the end of Revelation and all that kind of stuff, and the kingdom to come. So there's fears and you wonder about stuff, but the kind of backlog of trust and faith in God helps me with that hope for the future as well. So, but I'm actually more living in the day than I've ever done. I would have spoke about it in the past, but right now I live in each day, because each day can bring something else for me at the moment.
And Steve, what would be your advice to your younger self? Were you more fearful as a young man than you are now? And what advice would you give to the young Mr. Legg?
I don't think I was ever terribly fearful, I'm certainly not fearful about this, not in the slightest. I don't see this as a death sentence. This is a life sentence.
Wow.
Me and Al, we've got everyday matters. Every day counts. For me, it's been reprioritising and gratitude, being so grateful for all sorts of things. When I wake up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. for a wee, as I often do, more than once.
Keep it clean, Steve. This is unbelievable.
I thank God that I can walk to the toilet. I thank God I've got a toilet. I thank God that my legs are working. It's just, I'm so grateful. To have this amazing life sentence to reprioritise what's important, what isn't important, who's important, who isn't important. In the book, I talk about, 3 types of people: radiators, waterfalls and drains. Waterfalls are people who inspire you, who you come away, you're buzzing, you think, wow, that was amazing. Radiators are warm, just comforting people, and drains are people who drain you.
No.
And in this period of time, I've chosen to spend more time with waterfalls and radiators, and it's really liberating. And there are those people who drain you, you still spend time with because it's kind, but it's just reprioritising what matters and what doesn't. So I'm not fearful. I worry sometimes. I worry about my girls. I've got 5 daughters, and I think, will I be around to walk them down the aisle? I've got my first granddaughter. You know, when the oncologist told me on April the 17th, 5 months to live, and I said, well, I see my granddaughter who was born on the 6th of June. She said, well, probably, but she didn't give me any guarantees. And, you know, I missed a mom every Thursday. She's been with me. And it's just 8 hours with this beautiful little 9-month-old daughter. It's just such a joy and a blessing, and it's brilliant.
Wow, this effusive gratitude is incredibly moving from both of you. So for people watching, it could be anybody, but younger people specifically, I'm thinking of, who are anxious about the world, anxious about their future, anxious about life. What advice would you both give to younger people watching this in terms of how to meet your fear, face your fear, and push through it? What practical advice or theological advice would you give for people in that situation? Alan?
Oh, I had something good to say then.
I knew you thought it was
Drat.
I knew you thought it was
bridges, haven't I?
I would say I'm learning more that fear isn't. It's almost not worth it. It's almost like you can't do nothing about it. I mean, I got diagnosed, and when they told me, I was almost like, well, there's not a lot I can do about that. Do you get what I mean? And a lot of our fears, unless you're in danger, literal danger, a lot of our fears about stuff, there's not much we can do about it anyway. And so I've started to my younger self wouldn't have been as fearful as possibly some people are today, and that, because everything's ahead of you and everything's amazing. And I came to faith at 16, and I'm going to see revival in the world. I'm going to change the world and all that type of stuff. And in some ways, I've done some. I've seen lots of good stuff, and good stuff happens because I've been around, and God's done good stuff. But so fear, I would say, is not. It's less of a thing because I'm the stuff I cannot worry about anymore. It's not worth it. It'll waste my day and my time and my joy and my energy. So it's not worth me worrying about. And occasionally I have to say to other people, look, stop crying now. Let's have a good time. Do you get what I mean? Let's enjoy this moment. And so I would say fear often is being scared of something that may never, ever happen. And even if it does, generally, you can't do much about it. Whatever. That's it. It's obviously a broad statement I'm saying, because, if you're in actual physical danger, you're going to be fearful. But really, and again, I guess Steve will, every day is a bonus. Every day is a blessing. And so you get, I'm less fearful about living the day because they are shorter. Technically, statistically, they're shorter than they were a few months ago, and so it's less. I'm less bothered about being fearful, and I'm less scared to do things and say and try things. And it's more about, for me, living in the moment again, living each day, one day at a time. Sweet Jesus, and all that.
And it's not. Yeah, amen. Indeed, it's not that there's silver linings. It would be too trite to say that in this there are silver linings, because the reality is still pretty grim. However, you're both seeing sort of little redemptive waves flowing outwards from this. Steve, your book, The Last Laugh, has been phenomenally well received. Do you want to just talk a little bit about some of the feedback you've got from that?
Do you know what? There are silver linings to be found in all these things, Andy. They really are. And I'm just learning every day. I'm hearing from people all over the world who've read a copy. I put it onto audio book as well, so people can listen to me recording it. I mean, flipping it, that was 6 hours of emotion, recording the whole book. I peeled a few onions before I went into the studio and watched the repair shop trying to get all the tears out, and I still cried like a baby recording it. But it's impacting people. Just one of the stories. I came off steroids. I was really ill last summer when I saw you with colitis. The immunotherapy was chemo, and chemo doesn't work with melanoma. Had to kill my pancreas, so I'm type 1 diabetic, so I'm taking insulin. But then last summer they gave me some other immunotherapy which gave me colitis, and I was so ill at New Wine, had to leave early, and I was on steroids. But I got back gigging, and I was at these gigs, I was sweating profusely. I was like Lee Evans at Wembley Arena, soaked through with sweat. So I was asking for electric fans on stage, and I did this one gig in the Midlands the end of August, and it still wasn't cutting it. So I said to the vicar, could you open all the doors and windows, get some more air in? Which he did. 2-3 weeks later, he wrote to me saying, thanks for a great gig. What you didn't know, because all the windows and doors were open, a lady and her son were walking by, heard the laughter, came into the show, and have been coming to church ever since. And you think that is because, I mean, what a silver lining. Who would have thought coming off steroids and sweating? I mean, I was sweating like Daddy Pig at a hog roast. I mean, you've never seen anything like it. But out of that situation, this lady came to church. I sent a copy of the book to Sarah, Duchess of York, who's battled with breast cancer and now just announced she's got melanoma, malignant melanoma, like me. And I sent her a copy of the book, and got this beautiful little handwritten card back the other day, just saying, thanks so much for the letter and the note. I will win this battle too. Love, Sarah. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? Maybe she'll read the book. I sent a copy to the King. You just do not know. There's good come out of all these situations. There has to be.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Alan, have you sent anything to the King?
No, not at all.
Yeah, what you have done, because you and I had a conversation when we talked about fundraising gigs, which is big in the comedy on the comedy circuit, fundraising gigs.
Yeah,
and you were obviously very skeptical about raising any money for yourself, as you said earlier.
I was,
but a number of things have happened. Not just the amount of money that you've raised, but the fact that people are setting up these gigs. Do you have an example of somebody surprising you with a donation or an event that they've instigated?
Yeah, there's a few, to be honest, but Hot Water Comedy. I know we could talk about what you're doing, but we'll talk about someone else instead. Hot Water Comedy. Hot Water Comedy, which is a massive club in Liverpool, and massive on social media. When they heard the news, and a podcast that I've been on occasionally called Another One, which is not as wholesome as this podcast, they decided they wanted to do a fundraiser for me. So they decided to do 2 nights in their brand new venue. And they asked comedians, and everyone just said yes. And these comedians are like, they're where it's at the moment in terms of, popular social media type stuff and clips on Facebook and all that. They're really good, massive comedians. They all said, yeah, they're all doing it for me on the 8th and the 15th of April in Liverpool. And they reckon they will raise 40 to 50,000 pounds in them two gigs, which gets me kind of one treatment, you know what I mean? So that is a massive thing. And I went on Another One podcast to talk about it, and we were talking about the provision of God. Now, these are atheists, right? They'll tell you they are atheists, right? And it is. I don't suggest any of your listeners listen to that podcast because it's a bit rough. Let's just say that. And they said to me, I see your fundraiser and what people are doing for you by putting these gigs on and all that as the provision of God for your life. I know, madness, innit? And then another church that I know a little bit in Bootle area, they decided they were having a collection for me on top of their own normal giving type thing. And they had a collection, they got 850 quid, and the minister came to give me the check and stuff. And as he was talking to me, he said, most people don't get to know they're loved in their lifetime. They normally find out, they don't find out. It's their funerals that people say nice things about them. He said, looking at your fundraiser, you're seeing that you're loved. And it is quite a humbling experience, and it's quite an emotional that's the bit that's got me more emotional, the fundraiser, than the diagnosis, the prognosis when they were telling me on the phone. The fundraiser has got to me at times. It's made me tearful because, I know people who've given me a tenner, and I know that tenner for them is a lot of money. They struggle to feed their kids, and that's hard to take, and that's hard to accept and receive. Specifically for someone like me who's almost provided for themselves all their life. I've had kids giving me their pocket money. It's just, it makes me very emotional, that side of things. And I guess it does. I didn't think anyone liked me, if I'll be honest. But it does make you think that my life hasn't been a kind of waste, in a sense. That when I've tried to be good, I'm no saint or anything like that. I've tried to do good and be nice to people all my life and help people. And maybe some of that, it's almost a shrewd manager, and I don't mean I've done it on purpose so that I get paid back in the end good myself, but it's almost a shrewd manager who's lived in a way that when his time to be in need comes, people help out, if you get what I'm saying. And I think a lifetime of trying to follow Jesus in the best way I can, which I see as also helping people and supporting people and all that kind of stuff. A lifetime of doing that it's my turn to kind of benefit from some of that. I mean, it is actually humbling and very emotional, if I'm honest.
And I think what's fascinating and impressive about both of you, having known you both for a long time, is that although you're both performers, neither of you live your lives in an egocentric way. And what's come across on this podcast over the course of our conversations is that you have both basically intimated the idea that life is not a story about you. And I wonder whether there's something key in there for people watching this, looking for hope in the midst of fear, looking for purpose in the midst of despair. It's actually the thing that you're demonstrating, that surrender, not just to some vague higher power, but to the higher power of God in Christ, who comes to find us and sacrifices his life so that we can have that relationship of unconditional love with God that starts now. And you've talked about that fullness of life that starts now. And yet for every joyful moment we have now, it's just a promise of the things to come. So yeah, Steve, can you talk a little bit about that? Just the idea of life not being a story about you. Has that been a helpful thing for you, that surrender, rather than feeling as though I need to have control over this situation?
Yeah, I guess I've never thought about it. You're very deep, Andy.
Sorry.
I'm just an ordinary guy. I'm cracking on. When I got this news, I thought I could sit. In fact, one vicar wrote to me and he said, I'm amazed. He said, I'd have sat at home, put my family around me, I'd have eaten and drunk and hunkered down for those 5 months. He was staggered that I just carried on. But I discovered something at this Boys Brigade camp, this good news of Jesus. And I thought, I'm going to keep telling people to the day I die. I hope I can do that. Just to keep cracking on, choosing joy and getting on with stuff. A friend recently asked me about a bucket list. They said, what'll be on your bucket list of things to do? And I really thought about that. And I couldn't think of a single thing because I've done it all. I've got no regrets. Everything. I've written books. I've travelled to 30 countries. I can't look back in life and think, I wish I'd done that, because I've done it. And I just say to people, why don't you live as if you've only got 5 months to live? 22 weeks, 150 days. It's a powerful way to live your lives. What projects would you start? Which books would you write? Where would you go? Who would you hold a little bit tighter and tell them you really love them? It's an amazing way to live. I think I'm in a privileged time right now, and I feel very honoured.
Well, I mean, beautiful words to bring us towards a close. And I was thinking we could call this episode Tears of the Clowns, but I just don't think that's appropriate. I think the faith of the saints is much more appropriate for both of you. Alan, what final words do you have? What closing words do you have? Either something you wanted to say previously or just to build on the message that you've put across here?
I don't really know. It's hard for me to. I think that I'm going to say something I've already said, I guess, to reinforce it, is that living in the moment type of thing, living in the day, each day at a time, enjoying each day, being around people that are more positive, like Steve said, waterfalls and radiators, spending time doing that. I have got some things that I haven't done because I've always put them off, and I'm actually pondering whether to even try and do them now. It's not like a bucket list. It's more like a particular thing I wanted to start and that I never quite got round to, because it was almost felt too big to do, and so I've not quite done it. But I have been pondering in the last few days whether to even try to do that, as to kind of leave it behind, if you get what I mean. So I would, for me, I understand what Steve's saying about the privilege of knowing that your time is short. Because it does focus you, it focuses your mind, it focuses your emotions, your feelings, and it makes you make, I think, better choices, because you haven't got this infinite time that you can decide things. That's why I haven't done the thing I wanted to do, because in my mind I had an infinite time to be able to do it, so it was always procrastinating it. You know what I mean? Where now it's not, and maybe I've still got enough time to do it. If you get what I'm saying.
Do it, Al. Do it.
So I would say, just get on with stuff that you've wanted to do. You've wanted to do, it's in your heart. You've got a seed and an idea and a dream. Go for it. Don't wait. Don't wait for it to come to you or anything like that. Go for it. That would be my message. So live life and go for the dreams that are put in your heart. They're probably God dreams, even if you don't believe in God. They're probably God dreams that He's put there for you. So go for them things, I would say.
Well, unfortunately, we do not have infinite time on this podcast either, but it has been such a privilege to be joined today on Unbelievable by Steve Legg and Allan Finnegan. And it hasn't been an easy one, but I suspect, I have a sense that some people watching this and listening to this may have their lives changed forever just by the hope and the joy that has come across. So thank you for both of you. That you have kept and continue to keep the faith and are sharing it while we're here and while we've got the chance. So thank you to both of you for not pulling any punches, for not shying away from the tough stuff and the grim realities that you're faced with. And thank you for helping us to understand stuff that maybe we just didn't get before. So Steve Legg and Allan Finnegan, you've been absolutely amazing guests, and we hope you've enjoyed watching and listening to the show today on Unbelievable. As always, let us know your thoughts. Email us at unbelievable@premier.org.uk. That's unbelievable@premier.org.uk. Or on social media, X, formerly known as Twitter, at UnbelievableFE, or Facebook and Instagram at Premier Unbelievable. Also, please do rate and review the show on whatever platform you're listening to. It does help the algorithms in some mystical way, and also helps people who've never heard of the show to be introduced to it. For now, I'm Andy Kind, and it has been great to be with you and have you with us, and to be with my two very dear friends, Steve Legg and Allan Finnegan. We'll see you next time for more discussions and debates on Unbelievable. Until then, from me and the team, goodbye.